A little bit late, everybody, but good afternoon on this chilly in Sydney, whatever day we're on, Wednesday today. All right, well, we might, still got some people trickling in here, but we might get started. So thank you, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining in on our latest Chifley Conversations. I'd like to start by acknowledging that where I'm zooming from is the Gadigal land of the Eora Nation, and I want to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'd also acknowledge that wherever you are joining us from today, you're on Indigenous land that was never ceded as well. Now, as regular attendees of these Chifley Conversations know, and I know I can see some of you who are regular attendees, thank you for joining. The aim of these conversations is to really look beyond the immediate needs of the coronavirus crisis and towards the sort of social democratic society that we want. And as we emerge in fits and starts from the immediate impacts of this COVID-19 crisis, it really is time to take stock of what the crisis tells us about the nature of our workforce and the jobs that are most important in getting us through a crisis. So that's why I'm delighted to be joined today for our conversation by Tony Burke, the Shadow Minister for Industrial Relations and the Arts, and the Leader of Opposition Business in the House of Representatives. Welcome, Tony. We're joined by Laurie-Anne Sharp, who is the Assistant Federal Secretary of the Australian Nursing and Midwifery Federation. And thank you, Laurie-Anne, for joining us, particularly at late notice, as Lisa Fitzpatrick, who had agreed to take this slot, had to go before the Commission today. So thank you, Laurie-Anne, for agreeing to step in at such short notice. We've got Gerard Dwyer, the National Secretary of the Shop Distributive and Allied Employees Association. Hello, Gerard. And we're joined by Dr. Elizabeth Hill, Associate Professor at University of Sydney. So thanks everyone for joining us, and thanks once again to everyone here in our audience who's signed in. Most of you know the structure of our events. We will start with a few questions and moderated discussion to the panel from me. And obviously we've got the chat function here, so please feel free to put ideas, thoughts, questions in the chat function, and we can also draw out and get you to ask our panelists as we go through. And as always, it's great if people can turn on their cameras so that we can see your smiling faces and you can see ours. We will be recording this event. So please sort of no running around in the background in the nude or various other things, and keep your comments as you would want them done publicly. So thank you. I might start to the panelists with a sort of general question, and I'll start with Tony first and then go around the rest of the panel. Tony, what do you think this pandemic has revealed about our workforce, the structure of our workforce, the different effects it's having on different segments of our workforce? And what does that tell us about, I guess, what needs to change in the Australian workforce?
I think if I start with sort of the conclusion, which is job security has been shown, if you don't have it, that it's not only a problem for you, it will make it harder for you to get government support, and it becomes a problem for the whole community. Now, if I can loop back to that conclusion in a sec, but I think it's important with the pandemic to recognise there's sort of three very different experiences that have been going on in Australia. There are people where, in terms of their work, not much has changed other than location and distancing rules. There are some people, and it's a pretty common theme on social media of the photograph, hey, look at me, I'm meeting with people over a laptop, isn't this interesting? Or I'm having a drink of wine with my friends and we're all in different places. That there's that group. The second group are the people where work has become far more intense, and we've effectively changed our definition of frontline services. I don't remember a time until now that people who worked in supermarkets were properly recognised as frontline services. But not only were they performing a frontline task, they were dealing with really intense pressure, and at a time when the health risks were in a real state of flux, and people didn't know just how dangerous it was going to be. And then the third group are the people who've either lost all or part of their income completely during this time. But those are three very different experiences. And effectively, one of the things that's happened is for people who have had casual or jobs that lack security for one reason or another, they were the first people to be turfed out altogether. They largely found themselves ineligible for JobKeeper. And they're the people who, to this day, when we might need them to isolate if they're being tested for the virus, they're in a situation without leave where they're effectively being asked for the good of the community to not work for 2 weeks, and are asking the fairly legitimate question, well, what will I have to live on? And that's why I started with that concept of security of work. I think is a big lesson out of this, because it's become a problem for the whole community when people don't have security, and they've ended up in a much worse situation than I think many people would have envisaged.
Thank you. Laurie-Anne, over to you now for, I guess, your take on this sort of meta question about what this pandemic has, exposed about our workforce and how we work and what we need to do going forward.
Sure, thank you. I'm not sure who wrote the script for 2020, but I certainly know that nurses and midwives certainly didn't expect a global pandemic. And interestingly enough, last year, the World Health Organization declared 2020 as the year of the nurse and the midwife. So it's interesting that the skills of nurses and midwives have been highlighted so greatly. In terms of workforce, all our workforce have been impacted, of course, particularly in their preparedness to get ready for a global pandemic, and particularly in those early days when there was so much uncertainty, and we were seeing the visions of overseas of, patients in corridors, the mass graves. Many of our colleagues had died overseas because they'd contracted COVID-19, and they continued to. And I guess the impact on the workforce for nurses and midwives in Australia has been the casual workforce and the agency workforce, and in the particular sectors of the private sector, in aged care where conditions aren't as secure, particularly in aged care where we have a slightly higher casual workforce, 90% are part-time, and there's a heavy reliance on agency staff. So we also know that there's chronic understaffing in aged care, and we have many who, it's very low paid. We've got aged care workers with minimal qualifications making up about 70% of that sector, getting paid between $21 and $23 an hour. And if they're casual and having no access to any personal leave, there's no incentive there needs to be an incentive not to come to work. And when you're trying to meet your needs at home and there's no safety net, it's very important that these workers have access to paid pandemic leave. We have been able to secure that a lot in the public sector through the different jurisdictions in the state and territories, but the private sector, there's still a lot of gaps that we at the moment have an application to the Fair Work Commission seeking amendments to the Nurses Award and also to the Aged Care Act to get that very thing, just so there's some security for workers. I mean, this and these sort of provisions actually save lives, because they'll stop people who are sick from going to work. They'll give them paid time to be in self-isolation when it's necessary, and stop the spread of the coronavirus, particularly in aged care, in residential aged care, nursing homes.
Right. Thank you. Over to Gerard now. Your, I guess, top line thoughts as we start this discussion, Gerard.
First of all, I must reinforce everything that Laurie-Anne and Tony have said, but bringing it back specifically to retail, where we too saw the impact of insecure employment and not having that access to paid leave entitlements, and a whole range of issues, which I no doubt we'll go to during this discussion today. But I guess one of the things that became very clear to us was, yes, the community did start to understand how essential retail workers were, and we were there on the front line, and our people performed magnificently. What's disappointing, though, is that we were essential workers in April and May. Last week, when the Fair Work Commission handed down its decision, we became second-class citizens again, and we don't get access to an award increase until February. Other frontline workers, and I'm not begrudging this, we wanted everyone to get their increase on the 1st of July. So a very deserved increase for frontline workers in health on the 1st of July. But again, retail workers, we've got a very hollow thank you out of the system. And we continue to get that because we're one of those industries that do have a predominance of female. We're about a 60-40% split. But behind that, our workforce structure, and we have a growing list of how the weight of COVID has actually fallen unevenly on the backs of women. Be it trying to juggle homeschooling with increased hours in some of the sectors of our industry that became more intense, or going back into the workforce itself, who was stood down? Well, in the fashion sector, that split of female to male is often as high as 90% female, 10% male. That's where the stand downs took place. Back in the supermarkets, where we did have access to additional hours, that's closer to that 60-40 split. So our key call out is COVID has weighed too heavily on the backs of women and also on the backs of young workers. I might just leave it at that, Brett.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Gerard. So, Liz, this is part of the area that you're an expert in, you do a lot of research in. And I know that yourself and a lot of your colleagues at Sydney Uni have been pointing out this triple whammy to women work from this crisis that Gerard just pointed out, that it's female-dominated industries that have been the ones that have been forced to step up, put their lives on the line, but at the same time, it's been other female-dominated industries that have been the hardest hit with high employment levels. And I think latest figures had since February, 457,000 odd women have lost their jobs and 380,000 men since February. So, and then, as Gerard also points out, it's by and large females who've been working, but also taken up the slack for domestic work at home, even though, you know, male or Brett has been at home working from home too. So, your take on that, and how do we turn that around? How do we get a conversation happening now that we've seen these stark facts darker than we knew before, the way that female-dominated industries have been treated?
No, you're quite right, Brett, to point out this triple whammy. And I think it's interesting when you look at a ranking of feminised industries in Australia. We've got this interesting split that Tony and the others have referred to, where those working in health and education, you know, deeply feminised, you know, 70+%. And yet, because they're frontline essential workers, the impact on unemployment was quite minimal there. And because we're all relying on them in new ways that we'd never kind of realised that we needed them before. But then if you go down to still highly feminised, like accommodation and food, arts and recreation, rental and real estate, where you've still got about 50% feminised, that's where you start to see those really high, that really high impact on unemployment, you know, 27% impact or decline in accommodation and food, for example. So you've got that strong impact and that kind of disconnect within the labour market on women's experience. And so some of those women are experiencing extreme forms of unemployment and a lack of income and economic insecurity that is going to flow through in quite significant ways to their long-term economic security through superannuation and other things. But for others who, you know, white-collar workers like many of us who were sent to work back in the home and continue their employment, we saw them being loaded up with yet additional domestic labour. And so even some of the early surveys that were put out have recorded that, you know, mothers are looking to have spent an extra hour on unpaid housework and 4 extra hours on childcare, compared to fathers who are putting in half that effort. And of course, that's on top of what we know is already a highly strong gender differences in the take-up and distribution of unpaid work in the home. So you've already got women, Australian women doing more unpaid work, and then they're doing more again in the COVID context. So that, you know, basically the pandemic has accentuated existing gender inequalities in both the labour market and in the home. And the concern, I guess, for people who, like myself, who are researching and interested in gender equality, and we do have a government who says it's interested in gender equality and increasing women's labour market participation, this actually really smashes that that kind of agenda in new ways and unexpected, or ways that we certainly didn't expect, as Lorianne said, at the beginning of 2020. And so I think that points to the need for, our policy framework to be really strong. So around gender equality, so when we do get these crises, we're better prepared to kind of ameliorate the impact. So in terms of what can be done, I think there's a lot that can be done. We know just two kind of areas. One, we would expect fiscal stimulus to make that connection between generating maximum employment for every dollar spent. And new research is showing that when you invest in care services, in social infrastructure, not only do you get a higher total employment impact, but you also get a gender positive impact. So you get a higher rate of jobs for women than men. And so we've had recent research by the Australia Institute, but also international research across the OECD that is showing that gender responsive fiscal measures are not only sound economic policy, they are also very good for gender equality. And we're getting some good kind of quantitative analysis on that. And the other thing, of course, is early childhood education and care. And we've had an extraordinary moment in that policy space. We had a Prime Minister who, for the first time, I think on record, has acknowledged the essential and critical work of ECEC sector for women's labour force participation, for actually making the economy work and maximising productivity and the investment of human capital. And yet it seems that at the first possible opportunity, that was wound back, and there will be no recovery that is inclusive, that maximises growth, that's gender inclusive without affordable and accessible high quality ECEC. And policy responses to date, this kind of the transition framework is not going to deliver that. So there are choices that can be made, but we haven't seen those so far.
Great. Thanks, Liz. And I'd point out, as Kim Chandler McDonald has said in the chat there, one of the things we mustn't forget in terms of what might be the quadruple whammy really for female workers is that domestic violence figures have also gone up.
Absolutely.
As well. So I want to stay on this topic for a little bit. I'll loop back around to essential workers and the frontline experience in a second. But Tony, Liz just raised a really good point about at the first possible opportunity, the first bit of stimulus that's been withdrawn was that heavily focused on a female-dominated industry. And the biggest extension of a new policy was one that was designed to help heavily male-dominated industries in construction. So why do we think the government has this, I guess, desire to withdraw from female-dominated industries at one hand and push forward the male one at the other? I might get you to answer that first.
I think there's a few things that are going on at the moment that have nothing to do with policy and basically the preparation for a series of culture wars. That's what I think they're doing. I don't think it's whether it be the prioritisation they've given with the arguments they've been making about various sorts of university courses of late. There's been a long-term objective of the Liberal Party to say that they're the ones with the practical jobs, they're the ones that do the building of things, as a way of trying to take part of Labor's base away from it. And I think if you look at the order in which they've made some of these decisions, what they've withdrawn, what they've helped, entire sectors that they've left out, then it effectively, in every instance, they're trying to make sure that there are particular sorts of blue-collar jobs dominated by men that they want to speak to, and part of having that conversation has been to make sure they're cutting others out and almost boasting about it. I'd actually be more comfortable if I thought there was a policy reason that was somehow misguided and we could have a policy debate, but I don't actually think it goes that deep.
Sort of like a poor man's Trumpism, really, isn't it? But so just on that, how does Labor fight back then to keep having this conversation that we actually need to be a more inclusive workforce, so we need to look after all segments of the workforce?
Look, the political opportunity, I guess, that we've got out of this is the only way Morrison's got through this at all has been the extent to which he's adopted Labor values, and a series of things that we called for that he resisted. You know, he resisted the wage subsidy for a long time. He eventually did it. There's a lot of flaws with the way they've implemented JobKeeper, and effectively wherever they put boundaries around it, they were boundaries that disproportionately hit women. But wherever, had they not introduced JobKeeper at all, we would be in an even more diabolical situation than we're in right now as an economy. The challenge for us, and this is something where, I've heard Labor leaders for as long as I've been in the federal parliament stress that they want Labor to be the party that is about jobs. And I think coming out of this crisis, there will never, certainly for a generation, a stronger opportunity for us to put ourselves right in the middle of that discussion. Because for a while, the government had been getting some traction. I've never liked the argument. I've always thought it was rubbish. But they've been getting some traction claiming that part of the strength of the economy was the flexibility of the workforce and viewing casualisation in the gig economy as a good thing. They were the exact workers, disproportionately women again, who were the first to become unemployed. And so our arguments for security, our arguments for a social wage that allows you to be able to get to work, our arguments for pay rises and a better pay deal for people on the lowest income as a way of stimulating domestic demand, there will never be a moment when those issues all coalesce as being so economically important as what they're going to be over the next 12 to 18 months. So, we have this situation where the simplicity of the answer to your question, Brett, is I think if we simply argue for what the economy needs right now to be able to get to the other side of this crisis, then we will be right on the mark on each of these issues.
Right, thank you. I want to return now to a little bit of something and touch on something that Gerard said towards the end of his remarks earlier about, and particularly this wage decision last week and the putting off of the increase for retail workers and others. I mean, one of the things that I've been thinking here is Morrison has called, I see in the weekend, News Limited government propaganda rags. That next Australia Day should be put aside as a day of celebration for essential workers, all those that we started to talk about who've been on the front line. Now, like most things that this government does, it seems to me that it's a bit more marketing than actual recognition of workers, and particularly, as you say, with what we've been talking about already. So I guess the question I've got then is, has this outpouring of support for our essential workers, our new frontline workers, those who we've really appreciated during this crisis, is that more than skin deep in the Australian people? And if it is, how do we turn that into a moment to pressure the government to keep recognising the importance of these workers and their working conditions? Gerard, I might start with you and then I'll go to Lori-Anne.
Thanks, Brett. I actually think it does run more than skin deep with the community. Our members are still telling us that they are getting unprompted thank yous from consumers in stores every day. And I think that's quite genuine. Where the breakdown seems to be is in the policy response from our legislators. This government, as Tony's pointed out, the responses don't seem to be deep and well thought out. They seem to be more about marketing, and that construction package, I think most of us would agree, I think is poorly targeted. But it seems to be a positive narrative for them there in the news cycle. But as soon as you take a close look at it, it falls over. So what needs to happen is there just needs to be deeper policy thought on a whole range of areas. The insecure work. as I said before, who carries the burden? More women are in insecure employment than men. Move into superannuation. Who gets 2/3 of the tax breaks in super? Men. And a lot of that tax breaks, as we know, is at the top end of earnings. But who gets most adversely affected by the $450 a month threshold? Women and the young. And paid leave. Why is it that we have annual leave as paid, long service leave as paid, but then for too long we had maternity leave, as it was known then, was unpaid. Then thankfully we got a Labor government that was able to turn that around and we get paid maternity leave or paid parental leave, and yet people forget to put the super component in there. Now, my union's been able to recently win, after years and years of lobbying, paid superannuation on 52 weeks of parental leave, regardless of whether it's the government component, the employer's paid leave component, or an unpaid component. But we have to keep asking ourselves, why is it that people in feminised industries like retail and their unions like ours, the SDA, has to argue for those things? Why aren't the policy framers focused on making sure we have gender equitable policy settings? It's just not there. Be it insecure work, be it super, be it leave, and domestic violence leave, which a previous speaker alluded to. That again is unpaid. You have to go out in the feminised industries and then you have to campaign, argue, negotiate the paid domestic violence leave. My union and a number of unions have been able to secure that as paid in various levels for a large number of their members. But why? Why don't the policy makers get it right at the beginning and make sure they're taking into account the fact that women need to be treated more equitably in our economic framework?
Thanks. Laurie-Anne?
Yeah, well, just taking on from what Gerard said, I guess it's no surprise when the coalition themselves make up 80% of males and, you know, have demonstrated time and time again that they just don't value care work, and that's reflected in all of their policy decisions and all their actions. And just to your question about, you know, acknowledgement days and thank yous, and I think every worker does, you know, there is that recognition and respect, and workers like to be acknowledged, but it does come across as tokenistic when there is not any actions underpinning those thank yous. And, you know, by actions, I mean there needs to be paid pandemic leave for all people who are providing essential work during this time. And there also needs to be safe workloads. And just, you know, the coalition government had already done a backflip in the aged care sector. They wrote to all the aged care workers on March the 20th, you know, 90% of them who are female, low paid, part-time, have multiple caring responsibilities of elderly parents, children, and they announced the retention bonus for workers in over 2 quarters that would be tax-free. And just in the last month, they've already backflipped on that and have now announced that it will be taxed. Now that's a loss of about $400 over those 2 payments for an aged care worker who's on a minimal wage. You know, so they kept them there at the very height of the pandemic and made all these promises, and it is a real smack in the face to those workers, and just demonstrates how, you know, they can have all this rhetoric about acknowledgement days and thank yous, but they really do need to match it up with actions. But, you know, their default position, I'm not surprised where they went with the stimulus that is construction, because that's, you know, that's where they always go. It's underpinned by the fact that most of them in the coalition, there's not a balanced gender mix, and continually care work has been undervalued.
So just on that point, I guess, you know, I've noticed ads from companies as well who are, you know, congratulating all the workers and offering them, I don't know, free hamburgers if you've been an essential worker, or you know, or some other discount or whatever. I mean, how are we making sure that, you know, they're paying their cleaners properly and not just out on, you know, part-time contractors and casuals, you know, who are on precarious positions as well, you know? So how do we hold their feet to the fire about, you know, that they're living up to what they're now, these large companies are on the TV sort of proclaiming their newfound appreciation and value for essential workers. How do we make sure that we're holding their feet to the fire for their own essential workers who've been at the forefront and still working at the coalface during this time?
You want me? Yeah.
We don't know who you're asking.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, we asked them because we were inundated with pretty much all companies wanting to advertise and help nurses and offer discounts on shoes, and I mean we asked them directly all their labour hire principles and workforce, and I think let's just say a lot of people didn't make the cut, but we'd much rather. And nurses do, I mean, most people probably like those sort of things, but really it is more about, you can't offer this without being able to have protections in your workplace and looking after your workers, during this time, during all times. So we directly asked them, and we made decisions based on that because, unfortunately it was an opportunistic moment for many companies to advertise and use their brand. It might sound cynical, but
no. It has seemed to me to be a little opportunistic.
Yeah. So we're all over that.
Excellent. Gerard.
Yeah. In terms of into account of these companies who are taking a marketing opportunity and making sure that it's first of all, it's a genuine. If it is, making sure it's a long-term commitment. The obvious answer is to allow organised labour, the representative of people who go to work to earn a living, giving back to organised labour the necessary tools to ensure that legal minimums are honoured. I mean, we have got your wage theft epidemic that's blown up, and at last is getting some coverage, but that's been there now for too long. You go back and trace the growth in underpayments in a whole range of sectors. You can track that with the oppressive legislation that's been brought in to curb organised labour, i.e. unions, from doing the work that needs to be done, which is to hold employers to account and make sure that the legal minimums are being met and allow us to then also engage in an agenda for a more progressive framework of what are the proper entitlements at work, to look at the dividend of leave in economies that have become more prosperous and where workers were not getting the dividend. And we'll come out of COVID. We will grow again as an economy. And if it's just business as usual, we will continue to see the greatest proportion of the new wealth created going to capital as opposed to labour. So we really do need to get back to the policy settings and have a close look at how do we get greater equity, be it gender or be it between people generally in terms of working people getting a fair go.
Yeah, Gerard, if I can come in there,
of course.
If I may. You don't get that many occasions in history where society says, oh, this is a big moment for us to reframe and work out, were we doing things right before this? After a natural disaster, people will talk about whether they were building the roads and bridges right and things like that. But after something like this, there's actually an opportunity that we rarely have, and I can't remember an opportunity like it in policy terms, of being able to have such a moment where everything has changed and to ask a question, what are the aspects of how things used to be that we don't want to snap back to? And what are the lessons that we've learnt from this? And also, on the other side of this, how is it going to be different? And there are two key areas of difference that I think the business community is still needing to work through, and they haven't fully worked through yet. The first is the international borders will remain closed for some time. So a whole lot of our social distancing measures domestically will have gone, but our international borders will still be up. That means we will be more reliant as an economy on domestic demand than we've been at any other time in living memory. And we all know domestic demand is driven by people on lower incomes for how much money they have because they spend their money entirely in the local economy. That will become more important than ever. So the old line from business of oh, look, I just don't want to give better paying conditions because, yeah, I won't be able to afford it, with the presumption there'll still be a whole lot of customers turning up with money, whether it's through tourism or other places. That's not going to be the world that we're in at the end of this year. Domestic demand is going to be critical, and making sure that people who have traditionally been less economically secure, to make sure they've got more security, is going to really matter. The other thing with all of this is the economy currently is heading towards a bit of a cliff in September. In September, JobKeeper is slated to end, and at the same time, a whole lot of the leniency from the banks is slated to end. Now, the government may well revise that view, but if they don't, we're going to see a crisis of all forms of confidence happening all at once. And at that moment, people who've been, surviving through this period will just have a delayed moment of horror rather than being eased through the whole process. This debate about whether or not, and even though it's a government payment, but the debate about whether or not JobKeeper goes to a cliff in September or whether it has a softer landing will really determine not only which businesses survive, but how many workers, particularly lower paid workers who haven't been hit as hard so far, find themselves in long-term unemployment as of September, October of this year.
So Liz, what's your, particularly taking into account what Tony's just gone, what's your take on this at the moment?
I think Tony's absolutely right. Australians, I'm not sure, are ready for becoming, at least in a short period of time, a largely domestic economy. Australia is, our success, our prosperity is largely on the back of our deep integration into the global economy. So that it has been suspended. We can expect it to be suspended for some time longer. And we're going to see all kinds of knock-on effects to the labour market. So you've got the kind of the problem with low wages and the way in which that dampens domestic demand. But we've also got a hole in our labour force, in our workforce, with the going home of large swathes of our temporary labour migrant workforce. I think that's one thing that's really beginning to play out, the shock that actually temporary labour migrants are now a mainstream part of the Australian workforce in ways that haven't been identified clearly by any kind of public or transparent policy discussion. It's happened by stealth. Employers have been big pushers here and governments have had to kind of manage the politics. And so we've actually ended up with a significant proportion of essential workers, key workers with key skills doing the work. Now, a lot of them went home. Certainly none are coming in the immediate future. And so that's going to be another gap in our workforce. Now that could be good news for very young, for many people who have found themselves permanently out of their pre-COVID jobs. Maybe that provides a way back into the labour market if they've got the appropriate skills or they're prepared to go and do the work that those temporary labour migrants were doing, say, in agriculture, horticulture, etc. So we're going to see, no matter when whether it's a cliff or it's a slower kind of return, a more managed return, there's an enormous number of shifts. And it's very hard as a political economist to kind of read where the balance of the variables is going to lie. And this is what makes it very engaging and also exhausting for someone like myself, just trying to kind of keep across what's going on in the plus and the negative line of the ledger. There's so much to play out. And yet we're engaging in this moment without adequate social protection for so many workers, with so many households exposed to economic insecurity, and in ways that they've never envisaged being exposed. I think all the hype around, flexible work and gig economy, it's always been presented as something that works very well, and many of us who look at the work know that it covers enormous amounts of wage theft and deep insecurity that now is playing out. So I think the Australian population and just local households and families are really being confronted by the harsh reality of the contemporary structure of our labour markets and our workforces and the kinds of wages and social protection that are available. And many of us are very shocked by that and uncertain as to what that means for the year ahead, at least, if not 2 or 3 years.
So just picking up on that, should we, as one of the policy things we're looking at, and somebody has raised this in the chat, and I encourage people, if they've got more comments, questions, please put them in the chat and we can pull you out. But should one of the things we'd be looking at as a push back against sort of this thrust that's been towards gig economy jobs and precarious jobs, should we be looking at moving towards sort of a job guarantee and, you know, unemployment targets and things like that we aim for? I might start with you, Gerard.
Well, I think we need to have something in place because I think Tony made the point earlier. Prior to the pandemic, we saw insecure work perhaps as an individual problem, whereas what COVID-19 has shown us is it's a community-wide problem. And we need to make sure that we are getting security back into the employment relationship. Be it through the gig economy, be it through casualisation, be it through labour hire or sham contracting. We have too many people who are not in what we would all regard as secure employment. And Elizabeth's point about, I mean, our economy, yes, we're deeply entwined now into the global economy, but we are still a consumer-based domestic economy, where as most developed economies are, and security and consumer confidence plays a huge role in how those economies perform. So we need to get the security aspect back for employment. It is not fun to be bouncing around, particularly when you're starting to make life choices in regards to starting a family, perhaps, or you know, making an investment for a home. Unfortunately, that's beyond the reach of many. But those big life decisions, they are based on employment. And bouncing around in my 20s during, you know, insecure gigs might seem like fun to the commentators. You talk to a lot of people who are young workers, they don't view it through the same lens. And certainly when they get to their 30s, the research is showing they don't view it as fun there at all. We need security back into the employment relationship. That is good for those individuals, good for their families, and good for the economy.
Laurie-Anne, would you like to weigh in on this? Yeah,
I just in terms of the security, I mean, in the health sector, I mean, all sectors, it's really crucial for the worker, particularly in the health sector, where, you know, the delivery of care requires consistent, you know, staff. We've seen in aged care where, you know, agency staff have been brought in around infection control, and things can deteriorate really quickly. So that, you know, the stable, secure staff in the delivery of healthcare is really important for the consistency of care delivery. And in terms of, you know, just I mean, our membership, you know, we're just under 300,000, 90% of them are female. We have in aged care, you know, more precarious work. And I think they need to, you know, they need to have some security. They're low paid. They need to have the confidence that they're going to be able to go for a car loan or, you know, pay a month's rent or whatever it is. I mean, at the moment, there's just not that security, and it's not fair that people should have to live pay to pay. I mean, it gives them no confidence in the spending. It's really bad for the economy. And I think it's just a no-brainer that there should be more secure jobs for people, so that increases their confidence in spending in the economy, and also, you know, reassures people. I mean, you'll see less health consequences from it too, as we're going to be dealing with a spike in mental illness, you know, and all the associated diseases around that. I just think it's really important, and it really, you know, disproportionately affects women again, and those who are, you know, don't have the same safety nets as many others. So.
And Brett, can I just say on that, you know, the research is very clear that in order to deliver high quality care, you need high quality employment conditions. There's a very strong positive feedback loop between those two things. And the Australian community, we've seen through COVID, does have very high expectations about the quality of the care. And we've got trained people, but they need to be supported by decent work, the conditions of decent work in order to deliver that high quality care. And we need additional investment, around probably 2% more investment of GDP in the care sector in order to deliver the high quality care on the back of high quality jobs.
Yeah, Brett, if I can come in on
course.
that, there's a couple of additional policy levers that we have available that I just think are worth noting in terms of the security issues. One, and I was reminded of it when Gerard referred to labour hire, the simplicity of having a demand that if it's the same job, you have to have the same pay is something we don't have at law in Australia. Mm-hmm. So where labour hire comes in, you do find people working side by side doing the exact same job on radically different rates of pay because of the way labour hire is penetrating some of the workplaces. Similarly, Gerard also referred to the 450 cap, where you have to earn more than $450 in the course of a month before you get $1 of superannuation. I don't think we can go through this conversation without acknowledging that superannuation is going to be a massive battleground, I think, in the next 12 months. Absolutely massive. If you look at how the government have handled the crisis, as was said in the discussion earlier, if you're on JobKeeper payments, superannuation has stopped for you during this period. On the JobKeeper payment, there's that part of your wage attracts no super at all. People who have been carved out of the system, who've had nowhere to go, are the people most likely to have had to have drawn down on their superannuation. That means it will be disproportionately women who already have disproportionately low superannuation, who will disproportionately have taken out $10,000 and possibly a further $10,000. That will be a form of intergenerational theft that hits them, hits the budget and the whole economy for more than a generation as a result of decisions against super that this government's taken during the crisis. Now coming out of the crisis, they've started the conversation about not wanting to get to ever reach 12%, which was something that was put in as law back in Paul Keating's day. So we have here a major structural issue in terms of what retirement people will have and what entitlements people have now in superannuation that the Conservatives are going to go after and go after hard. And I should say, when I refer to labour hire, I should also refer to gig economy there. I just noticed in the chat a mention of NDIS. Most people, when they think about the gig economy, think about Uber Eats and Uber drivers and those sorts of app-based services. A whole lot of the National Disability Insurance scheme now, those workers work off an app as well on gig-based employment and a race to the bottom in terms of pay. There is a whole classification of essential workers now in a variety of aspects of the economy who are not getting what all of us would consider an essential entitlement to a permanent job. And they're working permanently, they're getting hours permanently, but they're not getting any of the entitlements that we would all think are meant to be par for the course in Australia.
So we're nearly running out of time, and before I come to a last question to all of you, I might just call in the chair of the Chifley Research Centre, who's also the Assistant National Secretary of the United Services Union, Linda White, who's also had workers who have been in this new Frontline and the essential workers in this thing. Linda, just given what you've just heard from the debate, how do you think we're heading? Oops, I need to unmute you.
You may, thank you. Yeah, thanks. Actually, I'm Assistant National Secretary of the Australian Services Union. But anyway, look, I think that...
there you go, that's career limiting, insulted my boss's union.
That's right, yeah. Failed KPI. I guess I think the points that have been made about gender are something that we cannot let slip, and I know that Chifley Research Centre did a lot of work on the gender pay gap, and I just see this widening if we do not call out the government for the things that they are doing which adversely affect women. And it is, when you start looking at the league table, it's massive. A number of the gender breakdown of people on JobKeeper, JobSeeker, it's more women than men. The superannuation, as Tony certainly said, and the attack that's going to be on that. The fact that JobKeeper was taken from childcare is, from childcare workers, predominantly women, to disadvantage also, and changing the system back to disadvantage women who are at work. I think you will also find that the recent announcements in relation to increasing course fees, that will also that will affect women more generally too. I look at, in the area that we have significant members in social and community services dominated by women, those course fees for people doing social work, for youth work, have gone up dramatically as well. What's that about? That's either to de-skill people, to limit their earning potential, or to burden them in debt for a long period of time. And I think it's time that we call that out. But on the positive side, can I say, I think unions are gaining significant traction. Our own union, and I know, I think both our own union has grown dramatically in this period of time, and we are retaining members, and I know lots of other unions are pointing that out, because, as Gerard has rightly said, it's not fun being a casual, all the crap that's been said about that, and then to be disadvantaged under JobKeeper as well. It just has brought it home to a range of people. That unions have got significant relevance. And so I think that, but I think we have to campaign, we have to fight about this. We can isolate the problem, but we've got to be the solution. And of course, you'd expect the Chifley Research Centre to say that the solution is Labor. It will have to be, but we are going to have to campaign dramatically. But I think we've had a shift in terms of what people think. The gender lens is really strongly poised over what's happening, and we've just got to activate women, because we're half the population, and I think we've got to capture that.
Right. Thanks, Linda. So we are nearly out of time. We promise everybody we'll do this. So we've touched a bit on the what we need to create greater security of work. So last thoughts from everyone, but in terms of also government's announced this new IR conversation, this new IR package, would that be a way that delivers some of the things we're talking about, or do we think we have to keep pushing outside of that? I might start with Gerard, and then Liz, then Laurianne, and finish off with Tony.
I think there's no doubt that industrial relations framework is a space where we actually can make an improvement for women and for the young. What comes out of that, I guess, is yet to be seen. But I'd like to leave people with a thought in terms of what's something immediate that we can look at, which is a stimulus, which does provide, though, disproportionate advantage to women and to the young, as well as the economic stimulus that we're looking for. And that is the idea of a tax rebate this time around, equal to the amount of JobKeeper, $1,500 for those people who are lower paid. So therefore, we are picking up a disproportionate number of women, which will be a good thing, and a disproportionate number of young people, which again is a good thing. And that rebate will go to those people on modest incomes who, as Tony said before, they'll spend it. And when they're spending it, that will help consumption. And that doesn't just help retail. When retail's strong, the Australian economy is strong. So I'd just like to leave a thought there that as we head into the budget in October, we actually are talking as a community about a tax rebate for lower paid frontline workers who got us through the pandemic, but to move beyond the front line and actually get some assistance to anyone who's in that lower paid bracket who may have been stood down during the pandemic. So it actually would be a good thing directly into the workers' pockets.
Right. Liz, final thoughts?
Well, I'm all for the policy discussion, and it is, as Tony pointed out, it's very tough when policy's been completely politicised, because you may as well speak to the hand, as my teenagers say. nevertheless, as an academic, that is my role. And so I guess I'm really keen on just pushing the economic argument for fiscal, gender-sensitive fiscal responses that are not only good for women, but also good for the entire economy and are going to deliver adequate demand to kind of, get things going, sustain the economy and deliver increased jobs. I'm also I've been heartened, Linda, by the amount of gender analysis that has come out through this COVID period. We have never seen that before. As someone who's been on this for a long time, it is extraordinary. I do think the understanding is filtering through. Again, that has to translate into action. But the other group I'm really concerned about is the impact is youth and the intergenerational inequity and poverty that will also be generated by this moment. And in that context, I am quite interested in the idea of a jobs guarantee for youth, as long as it was real work that developed real skills and not Mickey Mouse stuff. And of course, there's a whole debate to be had there. I do think there's some low-hanging fruit in the IR space that could easily be, hopefully can be achieved, that would just add to security for workers.
Lorianne?
Yeah, thanks, Brett. I definitely think we're going to have to keep on pushing past these IR meetings, and we're going to have to solidly campaign. I'd like to see more investment in the feminised workforce. We have an ageing population. The health industry is going to grow. We need to make sure that there is investment in that, and by doing that, we'll certainly assist the female workers. We're going to have to work hard in superannuation. We already know that women retire with 40% less savings. We're going to have to make sure that that legislated increase continues, which is going to be a big, hard, long fight, but we're going to have to make sure that we do it. And also, and just to protect youth and women too in that space. So,
Great. Thank you. Tony, last words.
Okay, well, you asked him the question about the groups that the government's got together at the moment with business and the unions there. They will come up with some changes that will be positive, but they will not be able to agree on the really large-scale issues that are facing the workplace at the moment, unless there's a significant shift from business. But yeah, effectively, the business requests have been similar to what they were in the 80s in terms of, can we please have more flexibility and lower wage growth? Now, it was one thing for them to request that when Australia had a real inflation problem. We've now had stagnant wage growth for years, and we need people to have more security at work. So the challenges are quite different. There will be some achievements out of that, but I have to say, I think the real policy work that's going to matter is going to be what we do between now and the next election. And the centrality of everything from my perspective is that we need more secure jobs. I think that's the strain that we have to focus everything on.
Thank you. I think that's a strong note to finish on. So can everybody please join me in virtually thanking our panellists today for a great discussion. Gerard, Dwyer, Elizabeth Hill, Lorianne Sharp and Tony Burke. Thank you all for your time. And thank you for all our participants' time too. Thanks for joining us and zooming in. We do have next Friday, the 3rd of July, the next of our Chifley Conversation series, and that'll be on the Brave New World. Shall we leave behind when we move out of COVID, and what things shall we take with us that we've learned in the way we live and work through these times? But thanks everybody for joining us. I hope you have a great afternoon. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Brett.
Thanks, Brett.
Thank you.